Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Mark Fershteyn, CEO of Recapped, a new category of product that helps B2B sellers collaborate with their buyers. Mark, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only because you've been almost a serial entrepreneur in not only in your endeavors pre-recap, but also thinking about growth and really just kind of thinking about how to connect people and products. And so I'm so excited to kind of tap into what you've been able to do at Recapped, where the company is. But before we go and talk about that, what were you doing before you started the company?
Yeah. Julian, first off, thanks for having me. Really, really excited. Think we're going to have a great conversation. Before founding Recapped, I spent almost a decade either selling B2B software myself or leading sales teams.
Yeah.
And really what I really had a lot of passion for is just building things from scratch, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't really a big fan of kind of maintenance and going from 9 to 10. I liked going from 0 to 1.
Yeah.
And so was very lucky to launch a couple of different teams, manage a couple of different teams. Started at Citrix, huge company, everything
Yeah.
from GoToMeeting to document management and electronic signature. Ended up moving to App Academy, which was a coding boot camp
Yeah.
where I got to help kind of more on the B2C side as well as with some partnerships, and ended up launching Recapped out of personal frustration.
Yeah. It's so fascinating thinking about the mentality of going from 0 to 1. And what in particular was more interesting in that kind of problem set or in that experience? Was it attacking the problem from a particular angle or perspective or uncovering it? That's what a lot of founders kind of talk about, the interest of that. But what in particular had you excited about that particular stage of growth of a company?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of it really just tailors to what my strengths and weaknesses are, right?
Yeah.
I may not be the most regimented and detail oriented, and I would never be a COO, right? But on the flip side, I think where like my ADD kicks in and I'm able to really strive is being the first kind of person going through the jungle, bushwhacking the trees,
Yeah.
right? Forging my own trail. Like for me, that's really, really exciting. Doing things that don't scale, having experiments, which most of them are going to fail.
Mm.
That is the most exciting piece of the puzzle for me. It's like solving that puzzle. And so I think just my skills and what kind of excited me, it just led me really to that. So I was very lucky to kind of be thrown at literally like the worst performing teams that we had and getting them up to top 3, top 4, top 5, and then moving on to the next one that was failing. And that was a really fun ride.
Yeah, I do. Thinking about building things that don't scale, and I love that concept. And a lot of founders, obviously, through the early stages, go through that process. But in particular, what about the things that don't scale? What were you kind of investing your time, your resources in, and when did you get them to the point? When did you kind of define what was scalable and what was kind of valuable and invaluable to kind of keep in this process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I was at Citrix, for example, we had, I think, 12 or 13 different verticals or industries that we went after, right? So we had products
Yeah.
and we tailored the messaging and the value prop really for that vertical. So we'd have everything from healthcare to finance to legal to accounting, you name it. And initially I was kind of just, I guess I happened to be just thrown at the worst performing one. It was like literally, it was the one that was missing quota. No one on the team was making any money. I was a new manager and foolishly I raised my hand and kind of said, what's the worst that can happen? I'll handle it. It can't get any worse. And once we got it to, I guess it was 6 to 9 months, and we got it to becoming a top 3 vertical in terms of revenue production. And really, I think a lot of it was really just enabling my team to do the work that they should be doing, right? Helping them tailor and make small changes. And I mean, they're the ones that really carried it, but being able to like push them to show that like, hey, we have this competitive nature. Let's use that. Let's leverage that. And let's have fun while we're doing it. Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
top 3, and then they just kept repeating that same cycle over and over.
Yeah. And is it the people? Is it the process? What does it take to make kind of that team successful? Yeah, I guess, yeah, the team or the process or something else?
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of everything. I think almost anyone can be good at sales because there's so many different ways to be successful, right? It's
Sure.
not a one size fits all, but I think there are best practices and fundamentals, right? You can have really great discovery, right? You can learn what the pains are and really amplify those pains. And I
Yeah.
think if you do a good, just even doing that, that's going to dramatically, I think, improve your chances of success. Right. So
Yeah.
that was almost always the first thing I started with, alongside with just hustle. Right. I think at the end of the day, if you're making 150 dials a day versus 50 dials a day, your outcome or your chance for a successful outcome is going to be significantly different. Right.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was kind of always just hustle first and then we just make adaptive changes to whatever we were doing.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it's almost like the motivation, or almost like that quality, that grit, that hustle that somebody innately has, and then kind of helping them in the right direction, go in the right direction. And what are those directions that you would go? Obviously, there's the traditional things that are extremely valuable in the sales process, the activity you can put in emails and calls. But what else when we think about sales nowadays, where things really rely on an omni-channel approach? You get some leads from marketing, you use some information, articles, and there's so much value added. But I think now the challenge is really getting that message tight and honed. But yeah, would love for you to respond about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always that aspect too, right? But I think, and not to be a walking commercial or anything, but this is exactly kind of why I started working on Recapped, right?
Yeah.
We were doing complex deals, and I remember I had this light bulb moment in my head where I realized that so much of sales is really just project management, right? You're trying to herd all these cats together, right? You're trying to really align everyone towards a mutually beneficial outcome, right? And just as salespeople, like, again, we're wired a certain way, right? We're running after 20 different opportunities. We're talking to hundreds of prospects. It's so hard to keep track of everything, right? Things get lost, balls get dropped. And so I really wanted just a way for my team to be able to really just better manage their deals and collaborate, right? Because I think sales should be a collaborative experience. It shouldn't be this like greasy haired snake oil man, like that we have this like bad image of when we think of sales. Like, selling at the end of the day is solving someone's pains, right?
Sure.
Someone has a problem, and if your solution does a great job of it and you're able to help them, it's a really rewarding scenario. And so I just wanted to channel that and enable my team to be successful. And I think one of the biggest challenges today is that selling has gotten so complex, right?
Yeah.
Competition is at an all-time high. Budget is almost non-existent right now, right? And so you have to square up and fight for every single thing while also managing 6+ different stakeholders on the buying side and all of their competing priorities. And so being able to do that in a way, it's just, I think it's really hard out there for sellers today.
Yeah. What is involved in that process? And even just to give some context for the audience, what team is the ideal team for a recap? I think a lot of us, I think in early stages, it's kind of a one-to-one. Somebody handles the full cycle. If it's not something super complicated, there's maybe one stakeholder and one decision maker. So it's fairly not complex. But obviously, if things start to touch different teams, technology starts to expand across within organizations, there's so many more people involved. What is the ideal structure of an efficient kind of sales process, and how you manage that project? Who's involved in it? What are the steps? And how do I ensure as a person, I kind of make sure that everything is completed in a full circle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So couple things, couple random thoughts. One, I think, is, again, going back to kind of my epiphany that sales is project, right? You have to manage it like a project. So first up, I would start, like, if you're doing a complex deal, and by complex, that can mean anything $20,000 or more, 25,000. Usually that's where we start seeing complexity happen, but it's less so around the dollar amount and more so about the number of people involved, right? If you and I get on a call and you're able to buy from me on a 30-minute call or a 2-hour call, we probably don't need something like that. It's transactional, right? Don't introduce any more chaos or any complexity than it needs to. And on the flip side, if you have to go to your boss, we have to get legal involved, we need security, we need IT, this becomes a 6-month thing. All of a sudden, we need to be able to create a mutual action plan or a project plan. You can do this in a Google Doc. You can do it in a Word doc, or really outlining what are the goals, what are the outcomes, what are the consequences of not achieving these goals, right? What are the next steps? And by next steps, we don't mean, hey, let's schedule a meeting. It's what is everything that needs to happen for that mutual success to happen, right? Hey, we need to go live and we need to start seeing results from your product in 6 months, which means we need to do XYZ today, or we're not going to hit that timeline in 6 months, right? So I think being able to really manage these deals and stay on top of them, that's what gives people an edge up today.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess what typically gets lost in the sales process, and what are teams typically using to try to keep track of this whole, I would say, project, right? I mean, it sounds like it, right? I think
Yeah.
to minimize it would be like the sales process, but really, yeah, you're right. It's a project because it incorporates so many different people, and there's so many things that rely on it being successful. But yeah, what could be people typically use to keep track?
Yeah, almost everybody out there is living in kind of email hell, right?
Yeah.
It's 1,000 emails. It's back and forth. It's different threads. And if you're the buyer, all you want is to find that proposal or that PDF or the quote or the case study, right? So now you're sitting there searching through your inbox, trying to find that one thing. And as a seller, like if you forget to CC someone in an email,
Yeah.
that could completely ruin 2 weeks of the timeline of the deal. And who knows, right? Like if maybe the company has to change priorities in 2 weeks, all of a sudden you just lost that sale that could have otherwise been successful. But to answer your question, I mean, everything could get lost, right? Content, next steps, time kills all deals. And every single day and every single little delay could be adding 30, 40% bloat to your sales cycle.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the traction that you've seen so far with Recap. What's been exciting about the growth up till now? How many users are on the platform, and what in particular exciting about the next stage of growth?
Yeah, we launched about 3.5 years ago as the first kind of customer collaboration platform. Going back to my earlier point, we were the first ones in the jungle chopping down trees, trying to figure out what the hell we were doing. And so we stumbled kind of into this bigger vision than what we originally set out for. And we realized it's not just collaboration between sales and the buyer. It's collaboration throughout from one organization to another, right? Having legal, having marketing, having customer success, being able to weave that collaboration both internally and externally. That's a very, very ambitious goal, right? And that's certainly not what we set out for. So we've raised about $8 million to date. We had a seed round about 2 summers ago from CRV, incredible fund, and some really great venture capitalists that joined as well. One of our customers wrote a check for $500,000. It was incredibly humiliating or humbling. Since then, we've 3 or 4x'd. We're growing pretty steadily. Made some changes, obviously, with everything going on in the market to be a little bit more less aggressive and a little bit more sensible towards profitability. But very, very excited with everything that's going on with the AI space, right? Thinking about how to incorporate AI into our product. It seems like in the AI, like we're seeing leaps and bounds on a weekly basis whereas things were taking months and quarters and years before.
Yeah.
Right? So the hype cycle is definitely there. But also, I think everyone right now is really, really focused on insights and analytics and data. What is the ROI? What is the return? What is every dollar is being measured at a level that it really hasn't been in a while. And so we're focusing a lot on that.
Yeah. I would say I would ask for other founders out there who are really looking to get a grasp of measuring their ROI and really keeping track of the metrics that kind of lead them to know what part of the machine needs improvement. You have the top of the funnel all the way down. There's so many steps involved. What would your advice be for founders now, being that it's so important to be kind of conscious and intentional with how you structure things? How would you structure a process, and how do you kind of cut through the noise to be efficient, but also effective in acquiring new customers? What have you seen that's successful for you?
I think one of the biggest learnings, aka mistakes that we've made over the past couple of years, is we scaled before we really nailed something, right? Because we had this pressure. We raised all this money. There was all this excitement. It's like grow, 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 grow. But in hindsight, I wish we would have grown slower, right? I wish, like, we definitely felt pains that people were doing too much work and we needed to hire other people. But I wish we would have waited till the pain was 2 times or 3 times more painful, right? Because it really forces you to have that discipline and that execution. And I think founders today are probably doing a much better job of it than when we were fundraising in 2021, when it was the craziest time of the market. So I would really, really push people to take their time to hire. Really, and if someone is not a rock star or has a really high outcome to be a rock star, just don't hire them, right?
Yeah.
Don't hire people that are good, in my opinion, right? Because if you do that 10 times over, the results can be exponentially bad. And so it could kill. I've seen it kill organizations. So thankfully we've been lucky, but that's my biggest, I think one of my biggest lessons is we're so focused on scaling and growing that we didn't actually have 100% confidence in everything that we were scaling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. And I'm curious in terms of your experience and how to share this with founders. Walk me through a process So I'm looking to scale my business. I've just kind of received a certain amount of funding. I'm looking to hire these individuals, but maybe I don't have experience hiring. Maybe I haven't had the kind of notches or I guess the battle scars to really identify the right person. What would I do to kind of make sure that they're right for my culture, they're right for my team, they're right for the goals that the company has at the moment? What are the questions you asked? Was there anything in particular that you found has been helpful to identify that type of talent that's going to be, yeah, I guess positive to your team versus something that you have to learn from?
Yeah, it's hard, right? So I think first off, you need to set your expectations that you're probably gonna screw it up 85% of the time,
Yeah.
right? We went in because I've been very lucky to have hired hundreds of salespeople over my career. I came in thinking that I knew what hiring was going to be like and how to spot great talent.
Yeah.
I bombed 70% of the time. And that was with years, like a decade of experience of hiring. Because hiring for a small startup is so much different than when you have a big name behind you, you're a big corporation, you have resources. At a startup, you don't have a lot of resources, you don't have a lot of training, you don't have a lot of enablement. And
Mhm.
so you're really looking for people that are comfortable with being thrown in the water and just being told to swim or figure out how to swim.
Yeah.
Right. And the best way to do that is by finding people who have already done that, right? Because everyone thinks they want to be at a startup until they're actually at a startup. And it reminds me of the quote, right? Like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face,
Yeah.
right? Mike Tyson or whatever. But like, it's so true. Like we've had through our network and through my friends who are also founders, like so many people join a startup, see what it's really like and realize, okay, this is not conducive to my lifestyle. This is not like, I'm not happy. I'm so stressed. I'm so overworked. I'm so underpaid. Like it really is not for everyone. But to answer your original question, I think there's a couple of tips. One, if you're a founder, I would really recommend doing every single role, if possible, by yourself to some capacity so that you can actually start having a better gauge of what's possible, right?
Yeah.
So for example, we hired some marketers. I wish I would have done marketing myself. I wish I would have sat down for 3 months and tried to become a CMO just so I can get dangerous enough. So when we make these hires, I can actually see if they're doing a great job or if there's wool that's being pulled over my eyes,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
would really recommend doing it yourself. If you can't, and regardless, even if you can or you can't, I would recommend leveraging your network. I'm
Sure.
sure you have some advisors. I'm sure there's people. And if you don't, find someone that you admire or a company that you want to be like and reach out to that person and say, hey, I'm a founder. I'm really struggling trying to find a great head of marketing. Can you please help me? Most people have been thrown a lot of tremendous help throughout their career. And most people are kind of want to pay it forward, right? So don't be afraid to ask. And then something else that was really beneficial for us is, right, we did this from day one, is we wrote out our culture values and those hiring decisions went against those culture values, right? So, and when we were interviewing, where do they rate 1 to 5 on each 5 of these 5 values? And it became very apparent that in the early days, like you want people who have that culture. You want to create an echo chamber. It still needs to be diverse, obviously, but you need people all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And then as you scale, you can deviate a little bit more from that. But I think the culture is what's going to define you guys in the early days.
Yeah. And also just, I think one thing that comes to mind too is, yeah, after you hire them, the enablement. How do you enable people to be successful in your team? You mentioned the culture piece, obviously aligning around that, but is it, if I'm bringing on salespeople, for instance, how do I enable them to be successful? Is it predefined scripts? Or is it tools, sales enablement tools? Is it meetings to go through and do a bunch of one-on-one role playing stuff? How do I kind of identify what's going to be valuable and helpful to my team? And how do I enable them as a founder without having to, I guess, manage it, right? Because a lot of times as a startup, you're like, I want to manage you 50% of the time, but the other 50%, like, I hope you're doing some good stuff. How do you enable those people?
Yeah, it's really, really difficult. All of the things you just said, yes, you have to do.
Yeah.
Right. And then so much more. Right. So I think any expectation of how much time you think it's going to get or expect to get someone up and running, I would multiply that by 3 or 4. I think one of the things I have not done a great job of, admittedly, is enabling people. And now in hindsight, I wish I would have invested more time and more energy because maybe they would have been more successful. That was something really difficult to come to terms with over the past couple of months as we reviewed where we've been as a company. But you're going to have to help them be like very, very few, if any people are just able to come in and just jump right into it. Right. So you're gonna have to spend 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 months really helping them. And that's why it's so important to make sure you hire the right person in the first place. Because like if you're going to be
A lot
spending
of
all this
time.
time, yeah, I mean, because not only are you spending time training someone, they're not doing it efficiently. And there's an opportunity cost to your time of things that you could be doing elsewise or doing better. Right. So you really have to make sure that every hour is going in the right place. And that's why hiring with the right people is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And just curious whether it's external or internal, what are some of the biggest risks outside of obvious things like fundraising, scaling, but what are some of the biggest risks that you think Recap faces today?
It's a really good question. I think when we first started, we used to be really scared of competition. I realized that competition doesn't matter as much as you think it does. Right. Well, just our human brains just don't do a great job of understanding really large numbers. And for most markets, the markets are so big that you can have multiple billion-dollar businesses and you still wouldn't have massive penetration in the market. So we used to be really worried about that. Now I think it's really making sure the biggest threats for us, I think, are the biggest threats that most businesses see, which is being as capital efficient as possible while still trying to grow and trying to maintain. Outside of that, I think it's really just nailing down the product vision.
Yeah.
Being able to prioritize the right features for the right customers. The customers you get are just so important in the early days because they define what the roadmap is. And if you build for the wrong audience, then you're just doubling down on the wrong road. Right. And so I'm always really, really conscious of product and roadmap. I think that's probably what keeps me up at night. Whereas back in the day, it used to be competitors and none of that shit really matters.
Yeah, yeah. No, so another founder said it to me. It's in a similar way, but there is so much opportunity out there. There can be multiple successful companies, and not everyone's a household name. It's very much it's the scaling of numbers that you're right. We just can't comprehend until we're engaged in it and see that there can be success amongst the competition, and everybody has a particular pain that you can solve. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Recap?
That's a really good question. So my co-founder and I are both immigrants. I came here from former Soviet Union. He came here from India. And I think for us, without getting too kind of philosophical, our big like American dream is to go public in IPO. Yeah. Right. So that's like the grand vision. Who knows if we'll get there? Who knows if that's what's in store for us? But that would be the ideal outcome for us long term, because I think, I mean, we live in an amazing time in an amazing place where it is possible. So
yeah, absolutely. I like this next section. I call it my founder FAQ. So I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions and we'll see where we get. So first question, I'd always like to open it up is what's particularly hard about your job day to day?
Something that's really hard for me is having a lot of empathy and putting myself in other people's shoes, right? Because I'm juggling so many things on a daily basis. And I don't think of companies as families, because if families, like, you kind of have to love each other, whatever, regardless of performance. I think of companies, or good companies, as really good sports teams, right? Yeah. Sometimes people have to be benched, sometimes adjustments have to be made. And so balancing that while still being very supportive and loving for my team is something that's been really, really difficult, but hopefully I've gotten better at. But that's the biggest thing, I think, for me, is just remembering that at the end of the day, we're all people and we're all struggling and we're all fighting in the same direction. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to ask, this is a question I'm introducing now, but is Recap similar to the first version of the product? How similar is it to what you first initially started building, or how different is it, and what's particularly exciting about where it is today?
Yeah, it's funny. So I found sketches from like 2017 the other day. It looks pretty identical. I think we got very lucky in that, because I was also building for myself, like I was able to kind of envision how I wanted the product to work. And out of the box, it looks pretty similar. Our scope, audience, ambition is only 10x, but the initial solution is still very much the same, right? Whether you're an attorney or a real estate agent or a salesperson on a complex enterprise sales cycle, at the end of the day, it's still just client communication and client collaboration, right? And so we want to be the collaboration platform for anyone that's doing back and forth with the clients, right? Even if it's just one-to-one, right? Like my accountants should be using Recapped. Our lawyers should be using Recapped, right? Because it needs to be secure, it needs to be safe, it needs to be easy. And for a lot of things, email just doesn't do the job.
Yeah. Yeah. When thinking about building software, a lot of founders will just come into challenges when they start to scale and integrating with other clients, say systems and things like that. What's been a challenge for your team to start building into and integrating with, and what's still on the roadmap that you're really looking forward to integrating and what it'll add in terms of the value of the platform?
Yeah, my co-founder brought this up a while back, and it's kind of always stuck with me. It kind of enlightened me. Integrations and features aren't just something that you build once and you forget about it, right? If we have a Salesforce integration, we have a HubSpot integration. Guess what? As soon as that integration is released, 10 other feature requests come out immediately. There's a maintenance cost to every single feature, and especially every single integration. So if you're thinking about an integration, don't just think about what it's going to take to release it, but what is the next version and the next version and the next version look like? Because you may find that the maintenance cost of that may not make sense for the 5 customers that are requesting it, right? So that to me is kind of just, it's been a change in the way I think about features.
Yeah. And is there anything in particular you're waiting for on the horizon to be built into Recap that you're excited to launch?
Yes.
Pulling for spoilers here, obviously.
Yeah. I think it's really cool stuff that we're doing with data and analytics and giving people insights, because right now insights can be the difference between a winning organization and not. Right.
Yeah.
And so that plus some of the other things that we have, like APIs and integrations and automations, will be really, really exciting, I think.
Yeah. How do you mentioned AI earlier. Yeah. How do you envision AI being a part of Recapped? What do you think it could add in terms of whether it's the analytics piece? Is it the collection? Is it some type of content generation, for instance? What is your excitement about what this technology can add to what you're doing already?
Yeah, I'll take it even just outside of Recap because I think it applies. But one of the things I'm really, really excited about with AI is I think in the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to see an AI co-pilot for nearly just about every role, right? We're already seeing this with engineers, with Hub and other platforms. I think it's going to help people be more efficient, more effective, and make smarter decisions, right? So in Recap, who to follow up with, when to follow up with them, what content to share with them, what next steps should be, what questions to ask, what answers to give them, right? Like all of this should and could be done by AI, and it should really help you be a 10x salesperson.
Yeah.
Right? And hopefully that means teams will be able to really just magnify their outcomes and their outputs without having to 10x their headcount, right? Which is every startup's dream.
Yeah. I love to ask this next question because I love how founders extract knowledge out of anything that they ingest, whether it's early in your career or now. What books or people have influenced you the most, and how?
Yeah. Steve Jobs is up there. Love everything. I'm a huge Apple fanboy. So his biography, highly recommend it. Obviously not always the nicest person from accounts, but had a obsession with the customer and the customer experience. And I think that shaped a lot of the way that I kind of make decisions, and thinking about products as just beautiful works of art, right? Or they can be beautiful art. Like doesn't have to be an enterprise software from the 1990s, right? It can be fun, right? Like Slack is a great example of that.
Right.
So I think that, and then I think, the typicals, right? I'm watching The Last Dance on Netflix right now with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Again, that relentless kind of passion to be the best and to compete and to win, for me, is really inspiring.
Yeah. I guess for founders out there, any like first founder books that kind of helped you, I guess, launch or go early on. I was curious on what kind of was almost your Bible in the first period of the battleground.
Yeah. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. Phil Knight's Shoe Dog was really great. A lot of the books that I kind of always prescribe are more around sales. I think Influence is a must read for anyone. I think understanding like human psychology, which also dovetails really well into sales and sales psychology. And then Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, I think is just a really good read for people just in general, around not letting things really get to you, having a stoic mindset.
Yeah.
I'm reading right now actually, but I'd say those are 2 really good ones. And then there's also The Hard Thing About Hard Things. That was also a really good read.
Yeah. I love those. Well, Mark, I know we're coming to the close of the episode, so I like to make sure we didn't leave anything on the table. Is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring up? Obviously, we'll get a chance to give you your plugs, but yeah, anything we left on the table here.
No, Julian, I think this was great. Good thought-provoking questions. Definitely wasn't for most of them, so that's good. No, I don't think there's anything else to add.
Amazing, man. Well, tell us where we can be a fan of you, where we can support you and the product. Give us your LinkedIn, your Twitters, your Instagrams, wherever you want. Where can we get in touch with you and be a fan and support?
Absolutely. First off, email if anyone has any questions, wants to reach out, anything I can do to help, right? From a startup founder that's gotten a lot of assistance over the years, more than happy to pay it forward. Mark@recapped.io. It's on pretty much every piece of clothing I own and wear. I don't do a lot of social media, but you can find me on LinkedIn. And then if you think Recap can help you and really nail down a process and help you close more deals and deliver a better customer experience, please go to recap.io. You'll speak to someone on the team or myself or whoever, but more than happy to help. Just reach out.
Amazing, Mark. It's such a pleasure not only learning about your early experience, but what brought you to Recap and how you're really helping teams really close the cycle that has common leaks, common problems. There's so many things that could go wrong, but really closing the loop on the communication and the process has been extremely valuable for companies up to now. And I'm excited to see where the company expands to. So I hope you enjoyed yourself today on Behind Company Lines. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Really appreciate it.